All right, we are at 12:01. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at Aparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. I'm so excited for this series on Microsoft Dynamics 365. We are kicking it off today for a three-part series. It's going to be led and sponsored by RSM, and I will let them talk a little bit more about what they do. And a little bit more about this series. My name is Yen Ting. I'm Program Associate with Aparo. And we've had a couple of, or quite a few nonprofits come to us asking, what is Microsoft Dynamics? What is it all about? So thank you for RSM for stepping up to the plate and explaining all of this to us. I'm going to go through our housekeeping and talk a little bit about what Aparo does for those of you who might be new to us, and then I will go ahead and turn it over to the RSM team. So all our webinars are recorded and they are uploaded to our website. All of you attending today will receive a link to a follow-up email from me with a link to the recording as well as the slide decks. I did get a chance to be on the attendee side for a Zoom webinar, and I snagged this screenshot. So I believe this is what you're looking at here at the bottom. Feel free to use the chat box to drop in your comments, introduce yourself, ask questions. There is a spot available for the Q&A. We haven't used that in the past, but if that's something you're more comfortable using, please feel free. We will monitor both. Also, feel free to raise your hands, and there's closed captioning available. So Aparo's mission is to transform the greater Charlotte community by supporting nonprofits with any of their technology or business process needs and barriers. And our hope is that it will help them amplify their mission and their impact in the community. The model that we use to support this mission is we connect nonprofits with skilled volunteers. And we have three buckets of services: advice, education, and solutions. So typically our nonprofits, they come through our advice service first, and it's really getting connected one-on-one with who we call a tech therapist, talking about your tech needs, getting some coaching on some challenges, getting guidance, or getting referred to some of our other services that will best suit what you're looking for. So an example of that is under education. We offer team trainings and workshops. We have a lot of amazing skilled volunteers who are ready to provide a tailored training for your team. And just to give you an idea, the most popular ones have been around Excel and Microsoft Teams. And then finally, if you're looking more for a solution for your technology need, we offer that as well. We'll connect you with a volunteer or a team of volunteers to help you find that solution that will help with your processes. So an example of that would be around donor management systems or case management systems, or maybe something around Microsoft Dynamics, who knows? So if ever you want to get connected with Aparo, if you haven't already, you can go to our website at aparo.org/nonprofits, fill out the form, and one of us will get in contact with you. You'll also have my email address if you want to contact me directly. That'll be great. And then finally, if you want to stay updated to Aparo's events and services, please subscribe to our email list. And that is it for me. I will go ahead, stop sharing my screen, and turn it over to our RSM team.
Thank you, Yinting. We are so happy to be here. My name is Michelle Juliana. I'm one of the principals at RSM. We're going to give you just a little bit of background into who we are so that you understand our perspective, and then we're going to dive right into the presentation. And we're just really excited that we're going to be here for 3 different sessions so people can come back and ask questions, get to know our team a little bit. We can go ahead and look at the next slide, and you can see the team that's going to be joining us today. And we're going to be adding some additional people over the next few weeks. So I am the nonprofit consulting leader for RSM, and proud to be a Charlotte native. I have moved away for a few years in my career, but now I'm back in Charlotte and really excited to be reconnecting with the nonprofit community and getting sort of back entrenched with a lot of the exciting things that are going on. So RSM is a national firm, so it's really a pleasure to bring the resources that we have to you. We have about 400 people right there in the Charlotte Uptown office. So some of the people that you're going to meet today, Bob Kanzler is a principal also on our business applications team and is really focused on the Microsoft nonprofit relationship. Zach Greenbaum and Jackie Jambron are also two really critical members of our dynamic nonprofit team. So they're going to be sharing with you some concepts and some technology, and feel free to just reach out and ask us any questions that you might have. So let's go ahead and sort of look at our agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit, just sort of framing up what are the challenges that we are trying to help you solve, and particularly around your data and how you interact with all the constituents in your communities. We are going to walk through an example, so kind of bring this to life through a real life example, and then we'll show you an overview of what Microsoft is calling their cloud for nonprofit. There are lots of different elements to this. So over the next this whole series of 3 parts, we're going to be showing you different elements and kind of drilling into certain areas. I'll just wrap up quickly with how our team can help you to think through a lot of this and other ways that we can help you both with implementation and just thinking more broadly about your technology plans. And then we'll open up a little bit of time for questions at the end, but feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. If you're not familiar with RSM, we are one of the largest accounting, tax, and consulting firms in the country. We're the largest focused on mid-size organizations. So that's kind of our niche in the market. And we do have a very large focus around nonprofits. It is one of our top tier industries. And we are all excited to be part of that industry. And this year we were very honored that Microsoft chose to award us their Nonprofit Partner of the Year. So that's really been great to engage with Microsoft's nonprofit focused team, which is called Tech for Social Impact. So today we're going to bring you the best of what Microsoft is offering in their technology, and then also kind of talk to you a little bit about our experience in implementing this. All right, I'm going to start by introducing Bob, and he's going to kind of frame up what the challenges we're seeing our clients face and some of the opportunities in the future.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate the introduction there. And as Michelle said, we are all super excited to get involved with Aparo and their client base to talk about nonprofits. So just to kind of talk about today and the next couple sessions, we're really looking to give a high-level overview of what the Cloud for Nonprofit and specifically fundraising has to offer us. In the next 2 sessions, we're going to do deep dives. One next week on fundraising and engagement, followed by the following week on the volunteer management piece. And at the end, you're going to see how Microsoft has done a really nice job of putting this all together in one system. That ties directly into what I'd like to talk about here, typical challenges that we see when we go and talk to nonprofits. So if we advance one slide, I don't remember reading the book, The Tale of Two Cities, but we tend to bring that out all the time. So this is the tale of 2 organizations. And if we look at 2 organizations, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. I don't know if any of us will get beyond that sentence within the book, but kind of tying into some of the conversations we have with our clients. Here's some of the conversations. We can't get a better, excuse me, sorry, let's try it again. We can't get better engagement from our community. We understand our volunteers and they're super passionate, but we can't figure out how many of our volunteers are donating. versus we reached out to our clients through voice of constituent, and the survey shows us that we need to focus more on eradicating childhood hunger. Or we have 150 volunteers that that both volunteered this past month as well as donated. So those are kind of two different conversations we'll have with two different types of organizations. And I put a little plus and minus, but it shouldn't take much to figure out, which organizations are using their data to its fullest. I got two more examples on the next slide. I won't read those to you, but how can we track success? Reporting for our grants are killing us. How can we get better data? And then we have some organizations that we're able to hone in directly on percentages, right? What is our impact? So again, kind of keeping those two in mind, let's look at what those two different types of organizations may look like. So this is one organization. And this is an example from one of our clients when we started doing work with them. They were using Razor's Edge, they were using the e-commerce solution, as well as Sign Up Genius for their volunteering, and MailChimp. They actually had two different versions of an email blasting tool used by two different departments. So all those tools, great tools, right? And serve the purpose well. But when we're looking to get data put together in this particular client's case, they were trying to pull information out of these systems into spreadsheets and using those spreadsheets to try to combine that data to be able to get a full picture of what their constituent looked like. So that's one part of this. I have here, they were using lookup tables and pivots and functions, all to try to pull this data together. Versus on the other side, we have organizations that are using the Microsoft Cloud for nonprofit. And in that, we have one data set. And that data set Microsoft has developed and is calling the nonprofit common data model. And I think the important part to take away here is they're thinking about the data first. And they're thinking about how that data all comes together. And then through that data model, they're building modules on top of that are utilizing that data model. So currently on the Cloud for Nonprofit, we have volunteer management as well as fundraising. And again, all of that is utilizing the data from the common data model. So for instance, if we have a volunteer, I'm going to pick on Michelle. Michelle Juliana is volunteering for us. Our volunteer management people would use that volunteer management module, enter Michelle in as a volunteer, and it would go down in that common data model. If Michelle then turned around and donated to us, we would see Michelle already in the system, and we would just be able to tie that donation to Michelle's record. And Zach's going to give us a little bit of an overview there in a couple of minutes, take us right into the system. So if we go to the next slide, why do we have disconnected data? In a lot of cases, it's coming from multiple systems. Each system does their job well, but it was not designed to specifically come together. In a lot of cases, what we see with these types of challenges is that each department has their own IT budget. So nobody's really thinking about the overall data and how that's all going to come together. So if we look on the other side, on the next slide here, this is what we get when we come to a system that has one underlying data structure. It's a centralized system. All the data is coming into the same spot. Seamless integration to reporting, emails, events management, right? And you're able to, at any point in time, get a live view of how your organization is doing and get a 360-degree view on a specific individual and a company. And there again, Zach's going to give us kind of an overview of what that looks like when we actually get into the system here in a few minutes. So what kind of risk do we have if we're not thinking about data and we're not thinking about the combination of the data? If we look at the next slide, there's people are responsible for a specific function and they go out and they buy a system for that function. what we end up seeing is a lot of systems at that point. Each of those systems has a licensing cost to it. So there's an overall cost that tends to be more expensive because we're purchasing systems directly for a specific job. There's siloed work streams, which leads to siloed data. Typically, there's not the support in-house that's going to have the people that we need to tie the data together in a positive way. And typically, when we see things like this, they're still on organizations that are more focused on their mission as opposed to technology. Now, that's not a bad thing, right? But as we look at the maturity of a nonprofit, we like to see that they've matured into the fact that they understand that they need a business so that they can focus on the mission as opposed to kind of things like operations, finance, and technology being off on the side. A couple more slides here until we get into the demo, which I'm sure everybody's excited about. Why do we want to see people thinking about data and having it managed properly, right? If we're able to pull data together correctly, we're able to let leadership, which also includes the board, access the data directly and kind of see how the organization is functioning. Automation can take place, so we can start to send out thank you emails. We're able to do drip campaigning and that kind of stuff when we're reaching out for larger donations. We have a better connection between our donors and our employees, right? Because we're able to do things like self-service. And we can understand regularity and patterns. And we'll just finish off with this final slide here. What kind of risk do we have if we have poor data utilization? Well, life becomes manual, right? And that tends to lead to a lower quality of work and a lower self-esteem with our employees. We have segmented views of our organization. We can see very well how the donations are going, but we can't tie that information to volunteering. Tend to see frustrated employees, and that tends to lead towards employee turnover. So with that brings me to the end of my section here. We're going to talk to Jackie here, who is currently just finished up an implementation where they brought all these disparate systems together under the Microsoft Dynamics umbrella. So Jackie, you want to take a second here?
Yep. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I am going to really highlight, the examples that Bob just walked through. So this, like Bob mentioned, is an implementation that we actually just wrapped up. This particular example is a charitable organization that associates themselves with one of the U.S. military branches. And what this organization does is they have 4 core functions. So they have fundraising, emergency assistance, educational support, and community programs for families such as childcare, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to walk you all through some of the barriers that they were running into. And you can see this is a pattern of what Bob was talking about. So I have the 3 different areas listed here, and those are my barriers. So first thing is everyone was acting in silos. They had different databases, they had different marketing software, they had different CRM systems, and they were sharing very little tools. So when we actually started this implementation with this client, they had 8 different systems when we came on board. So just to take this point home, imagine coming in, applying for emergency assistance one day because you can't put food on the table that night. And the next day coming in and checking your email and having an email from this organization saying, hey, do you want to donate to our cause? Things like that were happening, and there was a huge disconnect with data. We know that that is not the target audience for a donation at that particular time. So that's just one barrier. Another barrier was how they were leveraging their staff. So staff was spending a ton of time pulling the data from all the systems into spreadsheets, trying to consolidate it for leadership meetings. Staff was manually populating contracts for those loans and grants. So instead of things auto-populating, they would have to pull the information from a database, put it in a contract, and they were just sending them out through their Outlook emails. Another issue with the staff leverage was the self-service portal was very limited. So they actually had two different portals, one for donors and one for applicants. So that was a problem within itself. And staff was spending a lot of time doing manual processes. The portal couldn't take in payment information, so they were processing things like check information to get out a loan manually. And one of the last barriers I'll talk about is lack of integration. So I'm going to explain this one using an example. So a case of emergency assistance may be somebody has to get a flight that night because they have a funeral service the following morning. What would happen in these cases, since they were only giving out funds using ACH and check, is they would actually need that person to pay for their flight and then the following day give them a reimbursement because they couldn't get the money out fast enough. So that's just a couple of the barriers. We all know that there were a lot more barriers. And as I'm going through these, feel free to use the reaction button, raise hand buttons. If you have experienced any of these types of barriers, or if your team's actually implemented things like this that has helped your team getting towards that end goal of having one unified system. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about technology. So what we did is we came in and the first thing we did was we implemented Microsoft fundraising and engagement. So what this did was this allowed to have one CRM system across multiple departments. And with this tool, you'll see throughout the series with our team in the next couple of weeks here, there's a ton of flexibility. You can use security, you can use different forms, different views, so that all the different departments were able to see the information that they cared about, but it was still in one single system. From there, we layered in Dynamics marketing. So we know for charitable organizations, marketing is extremely important. Having that targeted marketing to send out emails about campaigns going on, different services you're offering, having this Dynamics marketing tool allowed them to pull directly from the CRM system and send out marketing messages. Next, we layered in Microsoft portals. So instead of having two different portals, we now have a single portal. And what the portal allowed us to do is to have a little bit more self-service functionality, but all still pulling from the same place, the same CRM database. And then lastly, we added in our grants solution. So RSM actually has some IP. It's called our grants management solution. This also sits on top of Microsoft Dynamics. So it's still within one system. And this allows the organization to do loan management, grants, community programs, all within one single system. So I know I didn't spend a ton of time on technology, but I really want to get to what we all care about, the impact of all this. So we went through the barriers, we went through the technology. Let's talk about what the impact is. At the top there, I have a solutions list just for your reference, but here I have what we've layered in. So some of the impact. Now we have a layer of effective and improved processes, and I'm going to walk through each of these. So targeted marketing, remember my example where I came in and I applied for assistance and then the next day I got an email asking for a donation. Things like that are no longer happening because departments are able to leverage each other's data. We have that common data model that Bob talked about earlier. So I can go and say in my marketing list that filter out anyone that's asked for assistance in the last year or 5 years to make sure that I'm not asking them to also give me a donation. But what they can do is say, maybe back in 2000, we helped Jackie out. We gave her some assistance and now it's 22 years later. She might be in a better position and she might be willing to give us a donation. We can target those people very specifically and be like, oh, well, we helped you out in the past. Are you interested in being involved in our organization, possibly a donation, volunteering, something like that? So the outreach is very targeted now that they're sharing all of their data. Another piece is automation. So there was a ton of automation added. I'll go through just an example. With the contracts, like I talked about earlier, all of that information with using integrations like Adobe Sign, there's integrations to DocuSign. This particular example was Adobe Sign though. We're able to pull information directly from the database into the contract. It's automatically sent to the applicant. When they do e-signature, it's sent back into the system, and then it's sitting there waiting for staff approval. So processes like this were automated instead of staff spending their time doing all of this manually. The self-service portal. So to be fair, they did have self-service portal before we came on board, but there was 2 different portals. So now we have a single portal. So donors come to one place, applicants all come to the same place. So if you have a profile with the organization, it's all stored in one place. And it's, if you're changing your address, it's not like you have to change it in multiple places. And also the functionality was expanded upon. So donors now have the ability to come in. You can pick what fund you're donating to. So say I have a particular interest in education, is very important to me. You can pick that your dollars go towards the education fund. Another really cool thing that this organization does is peer-to-peer fundraising. So sometimes bases will run competitions to see, what base can raise the most amount of money. They will get a special URL. And if they use that special URL, it brings you to the donation page, and it will go, those particular dollars will go towards that campaign, and they're able to track down to that level. Another option for a donor is they're able to pick how they want to pay. We all know nowadays we want to do it. If I'm on a store website and it has Apple Pay, you bet I'm using Apple Pay real fast. I'm not going to go get out my laptop and credit card. So you can use mobile payment, you can use credit card payment, you can even do PayPal payment. Some of the other offerings is setting up recurring donations. So say I want to give $5 every month, the donors are able to come in and set up recurring donations, and they are able to come back in later and modify that if they need to. So those were some of the features that we added for the donors to the self-service portal. For the applicants, they're able to come in and quickly apply. So the application's all in one single place now. They're able to set up their payment information right then and there. So if their application does get accepted, there isn't a manual call from staff saying, hey, we need your address for the check, or we need your ACH information. It's all done right there through the application. And the best part is you can come in and you can check your application status. I know customer service usually loves me because I'm calling all the time saying, what's the status of this? They can log in on their own and see that without having to bother the staff. In-house support. So the staff is leveraged in a different way now. Previously, any support around assistance was actually done outside of this organization. So there was a lot of communication back and forth, delays and updates. With the new system we're actually implementing right now is customer service with omnichannel. So this is another layer in the dynamic system. It's a different module that we're adding in. It allowed the organization to be able to hire 10 new caseworkers, and they are hiring more. And what their role is, they're able to get directly into the database. They can review the application, answer any questions this person may have, all using the one system versus doing this outside of the organization where you had to relay information back and forth. And then the last impact I'll talk about today is they now have numerous ways of not only to pay, but to get the money out. So the one example I talked about with the funeral expense and having to reimburse later, that doesn't have to happen anymore. They have a Zelle integration. Any of you use mobile banking, you might be familiar with Quick Pay if you have Chase Bank, or kind of like a Venmo. So they can get the money out instantly to the person instead of the next day having to reimburse them or worry that they might not have the funds to front that flight. So overall, I think we kind of reached the dream, right? We have a centralized system all on the Microsoft cloud for nonprofit. It's all sitting on top of that one common data model. And something to mention is you can keep layering this in. It's more of a journey. It's something where sometimes we use the walk before you run. You break off little pieces, do certain modules, and then add more as it fits with your organization's roadmap. So for this particular example, now we're adding in the omni-channel piece as their team adopts the system and really grows. And I think that's all I have. Zach, I think I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Jackie. So today we're going to talk about Microsoft's Cloud for Nonprofit. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of this, but it's going to be a high-level overview where we talk about some of the features, some of the things it could do for your organization, and then we're going to take a quick look at it. So can we go to the next slide? So just some high-level numbers to give you an idea. Microsoft is taking this extremely seriously. $2.5 billion in grants or discounted services, and we find typically that the licensing for a nonprofit compared to regular CRM licensing is about 20% compared to the full price. So you're getting a great deal on a fully configurable system with a ton of features. Next slide, please. So we're not going to read everything on this slide. We're going to talk more in depth about these features over the next couple sessions. But I wanted to take some time here just to give you an opportunity to look at some of the things that come out of the box with this tool. In addition to everything you're seeing on the screen here, it's important to note that this is going to come with built-in connections to the rest of the Microsoft platform. So if you're already using SharePoint, you're using Outlook, you're using Teams, all those tools will accelerate the value you're going to get out of this system. So does everyone see something on screen that they think could be valuable to them in their organization? And this is just one component of the Cloud for Nonprofit. If we look at the next one, this is for volunteer management. So again, it's built on that common data model. The people in the fundraising side of the house are going to be able to see a full profile of Zach, all the things that he's attended, event-wise, volunteer-wise, donations, the things he supports. We'll look at that a little bit shortly. And the people on the volunteering side can see the same thing. So you're going to be shown just the appropriate data to run your organization effectively, while other people are able to leverage similar data points with additional context. So it's very helpful, especially if you're doing volunteering donations as well. Next slide. Okay, so before I pass it back over to Michelle, I want to take a couple minutes here to look at a high level what the system looks like. So just give me a thumbs up, Bob, when you can see my screen. So you should see something that says fundraising and engagement and development overview. Are we looking good? Thank you, Bob. So the first thing I want to talk about here is, for the executive specifically, this is a dashboard. So when you're coming in to start your day, it gives you a good idea of where people who are managing the individual work streams are spending their time. So I can see a list of gifts received, as well as gifts by time, gifts by amount, gifts by specific designation. I can get some good visuals that I have the ability to drill down into and through. So I can say, gifts by primary designation. Let me start seeing that by donor, for example, right? So without having to navigate away from my dashboard, I can get a really good look at where my dollars are coming from. I can also plan ahead, right, with my opportunities in the current fiscal year, as well as by phase. We will see, and we'll look at this in more depth, I believe, next week, that there are multiple dashboards and multiple components we can be playing with here. So development, events, fundraising, marketing, something for everybody in here. One last thing I want to look at before I pass it back over to Michelle is, what does this profile look like? Right. So when you're using the fundraising and engagement tool, you're looking at a given donor, perhaps he's a volunteer, a board member, right? You can have multiple categories. We'll be able to see his history of giving, his membership statistics, his first and last gift, anything we have planned moving forward, our history of interactions with a given individual. And like I said earlier, has that integration with Outlook, so you can see opens, bounces, if he's downloaded your attachments. It'll suggest times to email him if he's out of office right now. Really powerful tool for communication. Then we have the donation side of the house, where I can see all the actual dollars that have come in from this individual, as well as soft credit. I can see planned giving in the future, so pledges and repeated gifts. We also have the ability to look at volunteer engagement data. So for Hayden, I can see he attended the education workshop. These are the things that he has interest in and the qualifications he's bringing to the table. So next week, we'll look a little more in depth. We'll see how this can be expanded beyond the baseline we'll look at all these tools and features in a little more depth, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Michelle?
I'll pull the
Okay,
screen.
there we go. Thank you, both of you. That was a really good overview. And I think just a teaser, because we're going to dig into this in a lot more detail the next 2 sessions. So just very quickly, before we go into opening up a time for questions, we can move over to the next slide. Just a quick overview of the kind of questions that you can ask us about now or as a follow-up. We do a lot of technology discussions just around your strategy, your plans, everything from your accounting systems to your CRM systems, obviously, around your donor management, like we've talked about today, cybersecurity, your IT support. So there's a lot of different elements that we can have a conversation with you about. We have partnerships with a number of different vendors, both Microsoft, Salesforce, and a number of different accounting system and reporting vendors that we work with on implementation. So just wanted to put that out there, and feel free. The next slide is just my contact information. So for any of these questions beyond the Microsoft platform, just reach out to me. Love to have a conversation and talk through it with you in more detail. But for today, why don't we talk about some of our questions? I see there's one question around Azure. Bob, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, we have 2 questions in here. I'll take a stab at both of them. Zach, we also have somebody asking, can we see any customer client oriented services? So if you have the ability to kind of queue some of that up while we go through some of these questions, you good there? Okay, cool. So we'll see that here in a second. So Azure, what is it? That's a big question, but it says, please explain it to me like I'm 5. So I'm going to try to do that. So Azure is basically Microsoft's infrastructure in the cloud. So if you think about if you have a server room, or if you had one at one time, you would have had servers in there. You would have potentially had SQL Server in there storing your data. And so Azure is kind of Microsoft's alternative to having a server room. So let's just say you have an older ERP system like GP or SL, where you still need that server. You can put it in Azure. So Microsoft basically carves out this server for you in the cloud, where they're maintaining everything. So you're paying a monthly licensing cost to utilize the service, but they're maintaining everything. So you don't have to worry about your Windows upgrades. You're not worried about the connectivity. That's part of the service that's available to you. You're also kind of paying for that service over time. So if you think about, it used to be fairly expensive to have a server and to buy all that hardware. You're basically paying for it monthly over time. So that's kind of one flavor of Azure is kind of that server. You can also have Azure that's that houses your data. So essentially, Microsoft is providing both the Windows, right, the Windows Server and SQL Server on top of that, and you don't have to worry about any of those layers. The only thing you have to worry about is getting connected to the data and utilizing the data the way you'd like to utilize it. So I think of it as kind of SQL Server in the cloud. Same thing. You're only paying for things monthly. In the case of SQL Server, you're paying based on utilization as well. So if you have something where you want to store maybe a legacy system, just in case you need the data at some point, you can put that in Azure. And if you're not accessing it, you're really not paying for it. So it's a very low cost way to handle legacy backups and that kind of stuff. And then there's one final component of it, which is around security. So having Azure up in the cloud, there's some concern about security. And you also don't want to have to think about, does my user need another login to get up to this information? So Azure will kind of hook your cloud environment to your local environment so that it's very usable to your users. So hopefully I explained that well. The one thing I'll also say about this is, one thing I hear from people is, well, I have a security guy. I don't need to really worry about that. And what I'll say to you is your security guy is probably working for you 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Probably likes the weekend off and probably likes to take at least 2 weeks vacation every year, and doesn't really want a phone call from you on Christmas or Thanksgiving. Those are all kind of the reasons why going with the Azure platform makes a lot of sense, specifically from a security standpoint. And quite honestly, I would say if you've purchased, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the purchase. If you've hired the best security guy that you can find out there in the world, he's probably not going to be as well versed as the thousands of Microsoft employees that are focused on this. So hopefully, feel free to put another question in there if I didn't properly answer that. Second question we have here is there a recommended software vendor or tools to support program evaluation assessments for youth and adults? I do drink the Microsoft Kool-Aid, so that's kind of my perspective on this. The application that we're looking at today, does have a component where you can take it out into the field, like on a tablet or on a phone, and do evaluations. That piece is called Field Service, and we're actually right in the tail end of conversations with an organization in the Southwest that's looking to do this very thing. So what they're looking to do is they're dealing with at-risk kids, and they're looking to evaluate them in a daycare setting. So the part of Dynamics, which Zach is not focused on, it's really not a focus of this series, but we would be happy to demo. It's called Field Service, but it allows for intake of so that could be somebody calling in or somebody going to a website to initiate the evaluation. It would then have a scheduling component, so you don't have people driving all over the place. It optimizes the routing and allows you to schedule on specific days, and then it'll go out and it'll collect the data out in the field. So hopefully that that answers that question. Salesforce, I do believe, has a similar component to it. I'm not as well versed on Salesforce, but in the dynamic space, we have something that works very, very well. We've used it in a number of cases to kind of handle those situations. We have a couple more questions, but I'm kind of to the question where Zach, they were looking to see customer or client-oriented services. Are you able to demo that? And you're on mute, bud.
Yeah, I was thinking. So I brought back the account form. Is this kind of what you're looking to see, where it's no longer targeted at an individual, but now either a vendor, a company that we work with, a partner, something like that?
You know what, Zach? I think maybe we want to, if we want to kick this to the next session, we'll have a little bit more time to prepare. But I think, Diane, if you could email Michelle, just so we can get your contact information and we can converse a little bit to make sure that we're demoing what you're looking to demo. But the long and the short of it is with the dynamics that we have here, there is another component of it that's focused on customer service, and I believe that may be something that we would want to see. We've also, in some cases, we've hooked in interests, right? So as people are donating, what are their interests? And that may be where we're looking to head here as well. So Diane, if you're able to connect up, that would be awesome. We've been asked to look at Microsoft Dynamics for marketing to our referral sources, but our referral information is entered into our EHR. I'm not sure if there's an integration with the EHR, but that would help for our marketing efforts and to know who our clients are referred from. There's basically two popular EHRs out there. Next question, what is EHR? It's electronic healthcare record.
No, I'm asking which. I should have said which instead of what.
Okay. So I'm sorry, who is this? So Stacy, are you able to put in the chat which one oh, looks like maybe you did it. Echo Vantage. That's not one of the two that I'm familiar with, but oh, for behavioral health. Okay, perfect. There again, the answer is probably most systems on the dynamic side, we have endpoints that we can expose that we can use to push data in. We would just have to see if Echo Vantage has the ability to push that data in. I'm going to write that name down here real quick, and I hope to bring you more information on our next call. But I would say 85%, the answer is probably yes. And hopefully I didn't go through those questions any quicker. Oh, we got a question for you, Jackie. What was the time frame with the case study presented from the initial consultation to the full? It says integration. I would assume that's implementation.
Yeah, so we started that in, I want to say May 2021. And then so the initial implementation, the 4 solutions I showed in that technology grid are all implemented. It took about a year and a half, and we continue to build on top of that. So right now we're in the omni-channel project, and we're continuing to make enhancements to the other solutions that we implemented for them. So now that staff's really adopted, they're excited and they want new features and can we automate this piece, which we love to see. As soon as your users get in there and start using things, it really shows how much more you can expand on top of the product.
So Jackie, I'm going to ask a follow-up on that. So you did mention a year. I believe though that the initial project was probably 4 to 6 months, and then it took about 4 to 6 months to get in, and then they went into optimization, and quite honestly, they expanded the scope quite a bit because they saw the value of it. So did you want to speak to that a little bit, where things started and how the scope increased?
Yeah, so it started out as a very basic, taking them off Blackbaud's Razor's Edge and moving them in Illuminate, which was the marketing tool connected to Blackbaud, and moving them into Microsoft Dynamics. From there, we added in like the loan management piece wasn't part of our original scope, but as soon as the teams saw our grant solution, they're like, hey, can we throw this piece in as well? Community programs was another layer that we added in, which was not part of the original scope. Some of the complexity around campaigns, the drip campaigns they were setting up, the tagging with, I want to know this exact dollar came from this exact email, setting things up like that were not part of the initial scope, but as soon as they could see the capabilities of the system, those were continued processes that we optimized for them at the end of the day.
Perfect. Thank you, Jackie. So looks like, all right, I'm back to the other screen here. So we had people using spreadsheets, active campaigns, and other tools. So this is getting back to the question around the electronic healthcare record and that kind of stuff. So, I had a slide up at the very beginning that showed some of the complexities when you do have multiple systems and you're tying them together. And it looks like this individual is dealing with the spreadsheet component of it and trying to get that all put together. But hopefully what you're going to see out of the presentation today and over the next couple weeks is that there is that underlying layer that that provides one data source, which you're able to get out. You can get out through spreadsheets in Excel, which we typically try to get people not to do. we kind of prefer things to go out through a dashboard or direct integration with other systems as needed. All right. So I think I'm trying to figure out where to go. I'm looking at all these different screens with all these different questions. I think we've got everything basically answered, though.
There's a question around what's a ballpark budget for a project that Jackie has worked on?
Sure. I think from a budgetary standpoint on that project, the initial project was focused on the fundraising and engagement component. I think because we did a really nice job of telling the story that we're trying to tell today. As we've indicated, the client started to see how we could layer things onto that same data layer, and essentially reduce the overhead and the amount of systems. The initial fundraising and engagement budget, those usually sit somewhere between 75,000 and 125,000. And then, as we're looking at other components, we can stack upon that. The budget I just threw out, though, obviously it's variable. It can go down, it can go up, so that's kind of it. The budget around licensing, though, is Microsoft is giving 20 licenses away for this product, for the Dynamics product. So if your organization is looking to implement this, if you're less than a 20 user organization, you're getting free licensing. If you go above that, you're essentially getting, Zach alluded to it, Zach had said 20%, and I wanted to make it clear, it's not a 20% discount, it's a 20% cost of that license. So it comes out to about $28 per user per month. So that's kind of where the starting points are. I always struggle when we talk about budget, because budget can definitely go up or down, and just to kind of swag it, it doesn't give the conversation the justice it deserves. Any other questions there? All right. I guess we're wrapping up for today. We look forward to seeing you again for our next two. I had to think, today's Thursdays. Next Thursday is really focused on fundraising. So while Zach kind of broke into fundraising a little bit, we're also going to be showing you the marketing component. So not only are we going to be talking about how we can accept donations, we're going to be talking about what it takes to drive people towards those donations, right? So the communication taking place to get there. And then the following week, we're going to be talking about volunteering. And that one's exciting as well, because we're going to be looking at more than how do we keep track of who our volunteers are in the system. We're going to be showing some of the components of volunteer management that allow those that are volunteering. Let's just say there's an event and we want to set up a communication area for them. We can set up a communication area for the event through Teams, which will allow people to IM, have video conferences, and share files. But our organization has the ability to kind of control what's going on for those volunteers. So definitely expanding the gamut here a little bit. Looks like we got one last question, and I'll hand this one over to Aparo. When are the recordings going to be available?
Yeah, so usually it's about a 24-hour turnaround time, but you'll receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording, and that will definitely be when it's ready. So feel free to share that link with your team, with others, and invite them to our next couple of sessions. But I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. This was such a wonderful overview. I'm so excited for the next couple of sessions. We hope to see everyone back. If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and end it for today and see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.